Doom's trainers on, currently making me break out in hives.
What size hole should we dig for ourselves now?
All the disclaimers. Let's do the disclaimer dance.
We just wanted to let you know that in this episode, we cover a couple of challenging topics.
Indeed. So there's a brief mention of eating disorders, disordered eating, and we also talk about animal welfare, particularly
Mulesing.
We're having a conversation about sustainability, environment, and it came up, but we wanted to give you a heads up. If that is not a conversation that is a good, happy place for you, then, well, it's not really a good, happy place for anyone, really, is it? But, you know, if it's more challenging than is worth your while, then feel free to skip this episode and go and listen to one of our other episodes.
Well, we usually talk about much happier and brighter things.
Yeah, exactly. This is a new territory to have a trigger warning, but yeah, we just wanted to give you a heads up.
Keep you informed. Welcome to the Yarn Library podcast with me, Adam Cleveley.
And me, Georgia Denham, at Tulipal on Instagram.
And today we are talking about sustainability.
Yes. I think we've already planned that it's going to be a two-parter because there's so much to get into. I don't know if that's spoilers. Was that spoilers? I don't know.
I'm interested. On the one hand, I think we might be a two-parter. I could also see it maybe being done in one and possibly that it takes 3 or 4. So.
All right. I don't know if I should have taken that as a personal atting.
No, that wasn't.
It's very much both of us, to be honest, actually.
Speaking
as the person who edits.
I don't know. Do you do the stats on who rambles more?
I have wondered about doing that, but I'm kind of almost scared of the answer sometimes. Yeah, I didn't sleep very much last night. So apologies if I am a bit more... I don't know what the word is because I didn't sleep very much.
Tired. Tired is the word you're looking for, Georgia. We were also just having a discussion about literally, and we were like, oh, we should really hit record now because it's time to get on with this. We were just talking about Georgia's amazing outro, which I was explaining to Georgia that I absolutely love every time the podcast finishes when I get to listen to it. And Georgia says, if you've got anything bad to say, basically, shh, it's a yarn library, which I was explaining that I absolutely love it because I think it's hilarious and it makes me laugh every time. But also I completely disagree with it because I really appreciate like negative and constructive feedback
you
too.
like the drama. No, and when I made it, to be fair, I was very tired. I think I didn't have my podcast mic at the time and I didn't want to get out my fancy mic that was for vocal recording, so it picks up everything. And so I used this old reporter mic that I had from a project I did years ago. And I was like I wrapped myself in like a mattress topper to absorb the sound. I was sat under my desk going, shh, it's a yarn library. Yeah, so that was the behind the scenes of that moment. But I made it just as like a last minute, like, oh, let's elevate. And hadn't discussed it with Adam and then it stuck. But I mean, to be honest, I thought if we've got haters, they're going to hate anyway. So I might as well say it to hate on the haters about like, shh, it's a yarn library.
Well, I tell you what, if you hate something about this podcast and yet somehow you still endure and listen to it, then feel free to direct any negative criticism to me on Instagram.
I mean, I'm not averse to, like, I'm always here for pleasant debate and criticism and constructive criticism. Yeah, I'm always here for that. And to that end, actually...
How is your PhD? Sorry, you literally served it up, Georgia.
You haven't got your sign yet that says joke. And so I need that. Or actually, no, because then he'd stop getting these sudden, unexpected deer in the headlights reactions out of me, which I know you enjoy. So
I do. I have to get something out of this.
So, yeah, I shared a story about some messages I got from somebody who'd said something about my PhD, and I do want to offer some clarity on this because I've had so much support, lovely messages and kind comments and things, and I really, really appreciate it. And it's so lovely to know that you really like the academic vibe that I bring to this podcast, and you are happy to hear about my PhD, and you don't think I'm saying it too much or bragging. That's really nice to hear. I just do want to emphasize that the person who had shared that, I don't think meant it in that way, in the sense that they wanted to hear about the PhD content, but they felt that every time I mentioned a reference, they felt that I was qualifying it with that, which is an opinion that we are entitled to disagree with, we are entitled to agree with, and I will gently leave it there, but I just wanted to offer that clarity. And also thank you for all your lovely, kind messages, because it's been very, very supportive and nice.
Though research is an interesting topic in itself, and the academic grounding, because what we're about to do is talk about sustainability, and neither of us are sustainability experts.
Yeah, that's a big thing we want to bring to this we really...
We're going to go into
all the disclaimers. Let's do the disclaimer dance. Disclaimer.
Going into a super hot topic, which is probably going to be quite triggering for some people.
Yes.
And we're going to share our opinions on it. Well, I should say
literature.
You're quite right. Georgia has turned up with a number of large files of notes and academic articles.
The irony of printing for the episode on sustainability.
Yeah. I have turned up with a warning for Georgia that fact-checking me is going to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. I might actually get you to...
fact-check myself.
Yeah, what I might do is just sort of send you a list and go, yep, I want sources for all of these claims, please. Thank you. I ain't doing it.
Or listeners can just listen to you as a academic source of truth and then me as the
opinions
on the side.
I mean, at least you're the one saying it.
Sorry,
that sounded so cruel. That was much crueler than
fine. I'm fine with being some just idiot chatty bimbo.
You can be the chatty bimbo. I like the idea that I'm the blonde woman academic and somehow you're the chatty bimbo. That's a nice table turn. I enjoy that.
I'm not sure. I think that's firmly established a number of episodes back. You are literally the one with the credentials and the passion for academia, and I'm just like talking.
Well, the passion for craft, I don't know. The passion for craft.
Passion for academia wanes at the end of a PhD anyway, doesn't it?
That's the passion, not passion for craft, but passion and craft. For anyone who saw my viral video about what is craft research, the funny example I gave in the middle of when craft shows up in all these random places.
Yes.
And it was passion and craft, economists at work. Yes, but disclaimers. As Adam says, neither of us are sustainability experts. I don't work in sustainability. You don't work in sustainability. But I think with the global crisis that we are facing environmentally, we all have a duty to be conscious and aware of these things. So this is partly why we're willing to have the conversation despite not being experts, because everyone has a stake in this and it's important. So when I am bringing things to you and Adam is bringing things to you, we are not experts. I have done my best. And there is so much variability when you're trying to get into the nitty gritty. There's so much variability depending on different studies, how different people have measured things. And so with the craft is a hard area to talk about.
We're just going to get into it, but before we do, I'm gonna pause for 2 seconds because I need to go and get a tissue to blow my nose, and I'm really sorry.
That's fine. Wait, are you sitting on a blocking mat?
In order that I can sustain myself through the podcast, I do have to be able to sit on a chair that doesn't make my legs numb. And I think you've got a comfier chair. For me, that's a comfier chair, but this one isn't so much. So I put a blocking mat on the chair.
I think it's an excellent idea. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm not accusing. I think it's a very, you didn't buy another cushion. You used what you had.
It's a sustainable choice for my blocking mats. I've also cut up my blocking mats and I use them in all sorts of... Anyway, we digress. You wanted to start by defining sustainability. Well,
that's a big thing because sustainability it's not a protected term, right? There's so many different places that it gets used. When I was looking around sources, generally speaking, the definition that people most referred to was from the Brundtland Commission by the UN in 1987. And it pops up all over the place as like this is a commonly accepted definition for sustainability. And it's meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So I think it's both succinct and broad at the same time.
I mean, if you pull out the generations, then it becomes a much wider definition for sustainability as well. Because when I think about sustainability, it's a particularly hot topic for me at the moment, but people talk about my ability to be on Instagram as a sustainable practice, but that, that's the same thing.
That's true.
What you're doing now, does it impact on your ability to continue doing it?
That's a good way of putting it. And I think it's interesting the part of that where it's like meeting the needs of the present, because I think sometimes people can feel almost like making sustainable or environmental choices are depriving themselves so much in the present for the promise of the future generations, that it can almost feel discouraging to be making sustainable or environmentally conscious choices in the present, because they're not necessarily meeting whatever needs that they've got for themselves right now. And I think sometimes people can be a bit off put by making environmental choices because they see it as a deprivation for their current selves.
I think that's a difficult thing. I think sustainability is a complicated topic, and one of the really hard things about sustainability is that you get some hardliners within that, and I fully appreciate the need for that as like a mental state, to be really hardline about it, because that's what drives a lot of the progress in the argument. Yeah. But it also sometimes makes it very unapproachable for what's the point of trying to take a more sustainable. If you're telling me that any transport is unsustainable, then what's the point of me even trying to go to,
exactly.
Rather, I'm not going to fly, I'm going to try and take a train. If a train is still bad, what's the point?
Yeah.
So I might as well fly. And it's like there's some nuance within there about, well, be informed about it, and maybe just take you don't have to go the whole hog. You don't have to grow all of your own vegetables and all the rest of it. Not that that's necessarily a sustainable choice either. Like that all of it is so nuanced that and it can also be super overwhelming for people, that there are too many difficult things to consider, and therefore the whole topic becomes alienating.
Yeah. And it's when you're talking about like hardliners as well, and recognizing the sort of the necessity of that within a culture society. So this isn't something that I looked up before this, and it's something I read about years and years and years ago. It's an idea about activism within society, and how, like, it's a theory, I think it's called like ripple effect, something to do with ripples and sending ripples through society. So the idea that if you have a certain percentage of people engaged in big activism, so thinking things like Extinction Rebellion, that kind of stuff, that whilst, like you say, it could be alienating to a lot of people, it could be difficult to engage with, people might not get it. This theory kind of talked about that it had then a ripple effect through society. And actually, if we think about it in that way, I'm not stating an opinion either way on how I feel about Extinction Rebellion. But if you look at how the last, I don't know, since 5-10 years, the 5-10 years since I read this, I think I read it around the time I was in my undergrad. There were lots of people I went to university with who were getting involved with protests and climate change things, and it was, Greta Thunberg was very much of the moment. And I remember reading about this ripple effect thing at the time, and actually in the time since then, the last 5 to 10 years, there are huge changes in what we can expect as consumers, what we can expect in society.
It's also, that also makes me think about animal rights, which, if you look at animal rights activism through the 80s and 90s, there were, now you would look at a lot of those actions and think that they were extremist in terms of the way that people took militant action against very large corporations. And that action was, in some cases it's illegal, but on the other hand, you can see the way in which that impacts corporations' view on animal rights, because it, rather than, it takes things out of just, let's have a closed discussion about X, Y, Z. No,
it was once illegal for women to vote.
Well,
and that's not me supporting the horrible
women's votes. Sorry, you left the door open too long, Georgia.
I hope that through our general, this is just so tricky territory, because you could soundbite so many bits of this conversation, I'm sure, and then you could be like, she supports terrorist action. I don't believe that things should harm people. But then, oh gosh, I'm going in circles here, because animal rights activists might say them, but you hurt animals, so it's really difficult. So veganism. This is my little segue out. I was vegan for 3 years. I don't know if you know that about me.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. So when I was 17, 18, I had a friend at sixth form who was a vegan, and everyone loved to talk to her about, oh, but what about your nutrients? And what about this? And she was very calm, collected, very clever cookie. And she just would deliver like responses and say, no, that's not actually true. And, you know, blah, blah, blah. And she was we were in religious studies, like philosophy together. So she was like into her sort of animal rights philosophy stuff as well. I've forgotten the name of the one I'm thinking of. Is it Paganini? No, that's totally not the right thing. I'll see if I can find it. Doing a bit of a Georgia and almost wanting to find out that, well, obviously you can't get all your nutrients. It just became a logical choice for me. And then my dad sort of also was trying to do the same thing of like prove me wrong, and then was like, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. And he's still basically been plant-based since for almost a decade. And the environmental impact of it, the animal perspective of it, it all makes a deal of sense. And so I can get on board with that. Right, how do I do this? So for various personal reasons, I am not vegan anymore, relating to former history of disordered eating and difficulties around that kind of thing. And so I realized that I could be majority plant-based around things, but didn't need to do it full time. And that having like a hard restriction was not a good personal choice for me, right? But I remember, this is where I'm going with this. When I first went vegan, so I was 17, so that's 10 years ago, there was not vegan stuff in Tesco, like vegan cheeses. There was not stuff widely available. I remember basically having a party when like the vegan cheese place opened in London, Fromagerie. I now get like a vegan Christmas hamper from them every year for vegan cheeses. Like the climate has completely changed. There was like one vegan restaurant that did vegan vegetarian things in the city I grew up in. It was not common. And it is a completely different climate now. And that is so much driven through consumer choice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember my mum saying to me years ago, like the 80s, 90s, she said she remembers being a teenager and going to Holland and Barrett to buy wholemeal bread because you couldn't get it from like a normal supermarket. So it just goes to show that like the world does change with choices.
And now wholemeal is pushed out by sourdough.
Yeah.
It's a
that's so true.
Consumer trend. I want to link up there with animal welfare because I think, you know, I'm thinking about your definition, but I'm thinking for me, the wool I use is so important. I'm just going to go straight back to the fibre choices we make. I don't really think about the wool choice from a sustainability point of view when I buy it. And that's probably my background behaviour in that I probably don't think about things enough. I think about it sometimes and selectively, like you with food. Like it's something I'm very conscious of because it's been a pattern of behaviour enough that broadly I don't eat much meat. And when I do eat meat, I think carefully about which meats I'm eating. Like steaks are a super special occasion for me because beef is such high carbon impact relative to any other protein source.
Like we don't cook meat at home, basically, partly because I just had all those years of not cooking it that I just don't even trust myself to do it. And
well, you get used to the fact that you don't need it.
Yeah.
But I think where it is more a consumer choice is where you have fibre choice. I was really interested in researching for this podcast about the difference in different wools around the world and where like their carbon impact and their sustainability impact. And there are two different things there that I really want to talk about. One is like the carbon impact of material choice, and the other is the impact on livestock and the, you know, with the cruelties involved. I specifically want to talk about mulesing and whether or not that's a sustainable choice. I'll just jump in and explain that because I don't want to leave a word hanging that's not well understood. But mulesing is a practice where, so it kind of comes from a problem of really woolly sheep. And merino is one of the woolliest sheeps that you get. It produces a huge amount of wool and basically has been selectively bred for the purpose of producing a huge amount of wool. And the finest merino wool in the world, so the wool takes on some of the characteristics of its local environment because obviously where the sheep are affect the quality of the wool they're producing. And so you get different kinds of merino wool depending on where the sheep are raised. But the place where the biggest sort of wool producer in the world or certainly in the 70s, was Australia. And they produced, I think it was about a quarter of all the wool that got used in the world was from Australia at that point.
That's crazy. I had no idea that. I know that they had
huge industry,
which just seems a bit topsy-turvy because it's Australia. I get that there are reasons why, right? But I'm just speaking from the instinctive point of like, Australia, quite warm. Why do they have lots of sheep? So Adam, please continue.
So, well, but that it gives a problem because the sheep in Australia, then when you're raising them for wool, there's a particular kind of fly that lands on the sheep, lays its eggs, and when the eggs hatch, the larvae eat the flesh of the sheep. So it's awful for a sheep if they get fly strike. So farmers develop the practice of keeping the sheep clean by, when the sheep are very young, when the lambs are young. Sorry, this is trigger warning. This is not a nice.
Yeah, can we record a trigger warning in a bit and then just put it at the beginning episode between like, oh yeah, we do cover like mutilating sheep and eating disorders.
but it's an interesting. For me, it's interesting because and it comes back to animal rights protest because animal rights has helped change this practice in Australia. But it's done in other places too. But in Australia, you take some of the skin off the back of the sheep around its bum and around its tail, which is where the skin stays more moist and folded, which is what allows the flies to lay their eggs. So that's, if you want to say that there is a cause, that is part of the process that happens. What happens is the sheep forms scar tissue when that heals, and the scar tissue pulls flat, doesn't grow any wool, and is tight and dry, and therefore the sheep from that point onwards just produce wool over the rest of their body for the rest of their lives, and from then on are not immune, but basically don't get this awful condition. And it's a controversial practice, obviously, and a lot of wool when you buy it will say mulesing free because they want you to know that doesn't happen. And it's interesting because I think farmers would argue that they are maintaining farming animals for wool as a sustainable practice, and that the way they are making that sustainable is that they are helping the sheep, which they are. Now, that used to be done without, I think that used to be done without anaesthetic, whereas now it is done, it's done under much better conditions in order to, because animal rights obviously do get involved in these sorts of things, and they change the conditions for the animals.
Yeah.
And so, like, in the long run, that does change it. But in terms of a sustainable practice, you have to question humans in the first place for taking a merino sheep, which is a massively woolly sheep, into that environment, and whether, if the sheep can't naturally survive in that environment, is it necessarily the right sheep for that environment? That's one of the, I suppose, more controversial areas in sustainability and in wool. But you can't get away from the fact that it also produces extraordinarily fine wool, and Australia produces some of the best merino wool in the world. If you want to look at sustainable practices, the value of Australian merino wool is much higher than other places, and you can still farm for wool in Australia, which you can't do in the UK. So in the UK is a complete opposite to that. Our wool is generally so low valued for most sheep that it costs more to take it off the sheep than to be able to take it away. So farmers get less money for the wool that they take off sheep than it costs them to actually have the sheep sheared.
Which is just kind of crazy.
It is crazy. And it's also like, that's not, in terms of sustainability, it means that part of owning a sheep isn't sustainable. The part that is sustainable is that you're selling it for high value meat.
Yeah.
And then wool becomes a byproduct, but it's a waste product at that point rather than a byproduct.
So what you're saying is that we all need to knit more jumpers to increase the demand and then increase the value of wool, and then it will all get better and people will stop eating sheep.
Well, yes, absolutely. And if you I'm just
This is Spark-based version. That's my little bit of like.
I'm just going off on my massive rant now.
No, it's a good rant.
If you go back to the 60s, wool was 10% of all clothing. And if you look now, it's less than 1% of all clothing. And most of that compression of wool out of the market has been done by polyester and acrylic, where because they are industrial processes that lend themselves enormously well to scalability, and you have huge plants making polyester and acrylic, and similar materials, which are priced in such a way that you just cannot compete with wool, and therefore wool is not an economic choice. And so wool is only used for, it has to be only used in very valuable clothing because it can't compete. I think that's tragic.
I wanted to pick up on one thing you did say there, just to be devil's advocate here, where you said that Australia produces like really great merino, that it's like fine wool. Fine wool was the term you used. That's aesthetically, materially high quality. But I suppose that's the thing, is for many people who are really opposed to like these practices, that means that it's not fine wool to them. Yeah, it could be, if you looked at it purely from a material objective perspective, like, oh, this is fine wool. But I don't know, if you look at the whole package of something, it's not detached from its ethical, environmental considerations. What do you think about that?
I think I'm very supportive of educating people to understand about where their stuff comes from. I remember having stark conversations with my children to make sure that they understood, when we visited a farm, that the animals that we were seeing were the animals that they would eat as a choice to eat meat. We are, they do eat meat, but that's, I want them to understand that is an active choice. That there is a life and a death to an animal, and that if you are participating in eating meat, that is a consequence of what you're doing. Because I think it's a really important. That's part of being conscious as a consumer. If you choose to wear a fur coat, and I don't think that's a choice that many people take these days, but if you do choose to do it, again, it's something that I think you need to be conscious of. What goes into that. If
you're a knitter and you're really like anti-mulesing, and you would never buy wool, wool's not going to tell you, it's not obligated to tell you if they've used mulesing, right? So they might say that they don't, and you can also kind of read between the lines, or you could figure it out, right? Am I right in saying that? I don't know. I don't think they're obligated.
I will say a lot of wool will say mulesing free.
Yeah.
But for that reason, and that's what it is. That's what it's calling for.
It's like by process of elimination. Do we get to a point where, because this practice is really common in Australia, that the rest of the world then feel that they need to put it on there because people think?
100%. So for example, South American, most merino sheep in a lot of. So I don't know that it's most merino sheep, but a lot of merino in South America is raised at altitude, and the sheep are in cooler conditions, and they aren't subject to the same attacks by these flies, and therefore it's not required. Yeah. And so that mulesing's just not a practice, but they absolutely have to label mulesing free, or you'll find that. I want to grab some balls of wool just to see whether it says mulesing free now. Yeah. But it's one of those things in a consumer industry. In my practice, in the world of health supplements, we use slogans 15 years ago. 10 years ago, we were the only person making the claims, and then what you see is that everyone else picks up on, actually, we need to say that too, or we need to validate ourselves against that standard, and people change it, and that changes over time. There's a big problem in wool, is there aren't many internationally recognised standards for that, and Woolmark is, in the UK is different to that, in that there is a certification process, but the UK is kind of fairly unique in that, and a lot of wool is moved all around the world from comes from different places.
I just wonder if someone could feel really, really strongly about mulesing, for example, but then at the same time, like you're saying about taking your children to a farm, for example, and saying this is a conscious choice, these are animals, and acknowledging the fact that this comes from a farm, and the process that it takes to get from farm to table. That's a slogan. The process that it takes to get from farm to table, and also how kind that is and the ethical practices that are within abattoirs, whatever else. Audience wise, I don't want to go into too much brutal stuff. But the point I'm trying to get at is, if on the one hand you're really passionate about finding good yarn, but then you're also eating meat, then you're not being as diligent about checking how that animal life has been ended or whatever else. I think that sometimes for me, I mean, look, everything around sustainability carries cognitive dissonance, right? Because we all have our areas of fixation of like, okay, I really, really want to make environmental impact in this place, in this area. And so any effort towards making informed ethical choices, I don't think that there's any issue with that. And I don't want to criticize anyone for making those choices. But in the same vein, I think it's almost really important not to shame or criticize other people for their choices. Do you know what I mean?
I don't have a problem. Like, I don't have a problem with people taking that decisions. I don't mind what other people choose to do. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Because I can see the argument.
Am I triggering you?
I don't think, not yet. I think if someone wants to take a decision, a consumer-based decision, that is theirs to make. And I can understand the argument that someone would make, saying, well, you know, from the sheep's welfare point of view in Australia, the only way that those sheep can have a happy and fulfilling life, and they are given a happy and fulfilling life, otherwise, is that practice goes ahead, and then those sheep wouldn't even exist otherwise. So they are given life by that process. I wouldn't judge. If someone wants to buy a particular kind of eggs from the supermarket, whether they're free-range, grass-fed, organic, or versus any other practice, that is someone's choice to do that, and it can be based on the values that they have in life. It may be linked to their sustainability values. It may also just be economic, and that's fine too. Like, everyone has to take decisions. Or rather, you also get decision fatigue. And frankly, that is a really difficult thing.
Exactly.
And sometimes you just need to forget about stuff and just get on with your life. And that's where sustainability for me often gets in the way of that.
There is something with craft, the kind of craft identity. I sometimes call it like a craftification. I need to figure out which one of these terms someone wrote down. But within marketing, like, things can really carry like a craft label. And craft, again, is like sustainability. It's not a protected term. But people often really instinctively connect craft and handmade with this is environmental, this is sustainable. And often that isn't actually very connected. But I mean, even just from the basis of, if you have a handcraft practice, and we mostly talk about textiles crafts here, like, if you're really into that and that's your passion, and you spend the time thinking, I want to make informed choices for this thing that I spend a lot of time doing, that me and my hands are on this yarn, I'm thinking about this yarn, spending a lot of time with this yarn, it's almost the perfect place to invest the time in thinking and making those sustainable choices. Like, if you've got that decision fatigue of like things all over the place, of life is real and it's hard to make sustainable choices all the time. You're never going to be able to make the best choice in every situation, right? But actually, our crafts, be that as a hobby, be that as a career, whatever else, I feel like craft is a place of intention quite often for people where they can make that kind of choice. Actually, no, that's opened up a can of worms, because I'm thinking about all kinds of shit in my head.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I'm going for it now because you said it. But
I was just...
I think that people truly believe that you're getting into a totally wholesome craft and everything about it is just wonderful and eco and sustainable. But if you look at the numbers for just a very, very simple baseline of what is the carbon involved in wool, if you're buying pure wool versus if you're buying a ball of acrylic, you're not necessarily doing any less carbon emissions if you're buying wool. They can easily be equivalent, and it can be possible, depending on where the wool comes from, that the wool is responsible for higher carbon emissions than acrylic. And I think that's probably a surprise for most people, because I think acrylic, people think about petrochemical processing, all the rest of it being high carbon, but it is also incredibly efficient. Whereas if you are rearing wool, then you have to have an animal alive for a really, really long time that's farting methane out. And that is not... I mean, that's one of the reasons people they can't get their head around eating meat as being so environmentally impactful.
And it's because the animal is alive for a long time.
Yeah. And a cow can fart an awful lot in the 2 years before it's... And that's why chickens and why chicken and eggs are a low carbon source of protein, because the chicken doesn't live very long. I get kind of wound up by people that think of craft as or our knitting craft or fibre arts in general as like ultra sustainable, because I don't think the sustainability comes from fibre choice necessarily. I
think the point I was trying to make here is not that, oh, well, all craft should be made with wool and we can make the more sustainable choices. It's more that I think that it's the perfect place to have these conversations and to actually interrogate what it is that we're doing with the materials that we have. So, for example, like acrylic, the environmental impact of acrylic versus wool. But then you have to think about like the life cycle in terms of, okay, well, what happens if I throw this away? Is this for something that I'm going to throw away? Or do I want wool because then it will be able to break down. It will be biodegradable with the right kind of processing.
When you wash acrylic or something like that, then you do create more microplastics. And some people are anti-microplastics. I would say to those people, though, what do you have on the soles of your feet? Because most shoes have some sort of plastic soles. Yep. And as they wear, like if you look at a pair of shoes you've worn for a year, the soles have worn down. What do you think's happened? You've made microplastics. It's not escapable.
No. I mean, within water supplies, I suppose that's a big consideration for people, and that's valid. But speaking of soles of shoes, I'm a really big fan of community clothing, which is like Patrick Grant, who's the guy who, lots of listeners will be swooning, the guy on Sewing Bee. So I don't watch Sewing Bee, but I forget how I even found community clothing. I think it was because I was looking to find some kind of intentional purchase thing, and everything is made within the UK. And they sell a lot of basics, really, really well made, long lasting. So particularly their socks are now the only socks that I can bear to wear.
Oh.
They're wonderful. Wonderful.
Amazing.
And I also converted my dad onto these socks as well. Got him some for Christmas. They're amazing. Amazing. The sports ones, we've talked about socks before.
Oh, yeah.
And they're so nice. And they are holding up, lasting a really long time. There's a lot of things within the company. They don't do Black Fridays or yada, yada. So community clothing make trainers. Dean's got a pair of them recently. He's very much one of these, like, wears a pair of trainers till they are completely worn through. And he'd bought a pair before that was supposed to be from a brand that were going to last a really long time. And it was a couple of months and they were completely worn through. But we were on a hunt for something that was going to be a bit more long lasting. Community Clothing had a collaboration with Walsh, who are like a British trainer maker for like a long, long time. Really cool, bright, gorgeous primary colours. He looks like he's going to school. They're adorable. They're holding up beautifully, very well made, gorgeous. I was thinking, okay, well, my trainers are good for now, but maybe when they wear through, which is probably a way off, I could maybe look at Walsh trainers. Walsh trainers are made with rubber soles, which a lot of people go, oh, that's great environmentally. I'm allergic to latex. I can't be having the rubber soles. One of those things where medically I've been told you always need to treat an allergy of some kind seriously enough. But generally reactions haven't been so bad. So Deem's trainers aren't currently like making me break out in hives and anaphylaxis. But I've got to be careful about these kinds of things. And there are reasons that not everyone can make all the choices. And I've realized that a lot of the times that I'm looking for these sustainable things or plastic free things, they've got latex in them. Or they've got rubber, natural rubber. So there's all kinds of reasons. I mean, wool, for example. Wool, people often talk about like, oh, no, I'm allergic to wool. And there's various people who say that's not true. You're just itchy, or you need to try different wool or whatever else. My grandmother, who passed away last year, genuinely, she was near wool and she she had a rash all over her skin, like a genuine rash. When she was very poorly and she had dementia and she couldn't communicate very well, or couldn't communicate verbally at least, she was given a twiddle mitt by her.
What's a twiddle mitt?
So twiddle mitts are, some of our listeners will probably be familiar with them. So it's like an occupational therapy thing where someone who is having tremors or difficulty with their hands, they might be able to either put their hands in the twiddle mitt. They're often knitted or crocheted by teams of volunteers and different organizations. There's like a tube of knitting, and sometimes there's different buttons on it so people can use their scraps and different textures, and people sew different bits on it. And it can be really helpful for people when they need some kind of sensory stimulation, or something to protect their hands if they're like pulling at drips and stuff. You know, really beautiful project, beautiful thing. But they're knitted with all different kinds of wool and yarn and stuff. And you can probably imagine where this story's going. She was given the twiddle mitt just after I'd been up to see her. I went up the next month and she'd been having like really itchy hands and, you know, had probably been in a lot of pain, not been able to communicate it. And she'd had this twiddle mitt and my granddad hadn't remembered, maybe because it's just not something that she ever communicated to him. She was of a generation that maybe didn't explain to her husband why she didn't wear wool stuff. But me as her granddaughter, we'd had lots of conversations about it. And so finding out that actually this twiddle mitt was potentially actually really itching her skin and it wasn't good. So I knitted up her one in acrylic and I went and bought some acrylic. I don't know, there are different reasons that people have to use different things, and cost, like you said before, is a huge thing in that. I just don't think it's fair to shame people for, oh, you're using acrylic, that's not an environmental choice, when actually we don't have concrete enough data on hand knitting and the environmental impact of hand knitting.
I would say by far the bigger impact, sorry, I realise I'm interrupting you, but by far the bigger impact is whether or not that item is going to be used for a long time. And I've got sitting right over there and I can see it. It's in my eye line. I picked out at the weekend, I went round to my mother's house and we were talking about my grandmother who knitted. And I learned something new about her as a knitter because I found out also she had machine knitted as well as hand knitted. I didn't realise she had a knitting machine at home. But that jumper over there that is up on the side, and
it's
hopefully
beautiful.
by the time we publish this, hopefully this will have been on my Instagram feed. But that's coming up probably for 40 years old as a jumper, and it is still in lovely condition and it is still cherished. Now, there is a huge sustainability argument here because you can have a woolen jumper which is used for 40 years and you can repair it. And I think if it's made with love and you care about the fibre and everything about it is loved, it will have to be repaired, and it, you know, all the rest of it. That could be true for acrylic too. Like if something is, and in fact it was, because one of the knitted items was a machine knitted, and I think it was probably bought from a shop, but it was a blanket that I remember from my childhood. I remember as a toddler that was a play blanket, but it was absolutely made of an acrylic wool mix, but it was absolutely matted together and in a terrible state. But I know that mat was used as a plaything for me, my brother, and my sister for, you know, probably a decade, and in intensive use with children. And so, was that a sustainable thing? I mean, the fact that my mother kept it and cherished it, and, you know, has demonstrated that it doesn't disintegrate over time, like, that's sustainable too. And I think the bigger argument for sustainability is about whether or not you participate in something like fast fashion. And that for me is where craft is there's kind of no question. But I always think about when someone asks me about sustainability in knitting, I think about, rather than trying to compare if I'm knitting with wool to polyester or whether I'm knitting superwash versus non-superwash, and I want to talk about that. But that's not the choice I'm thinking. I'm thinking, what else would I be doing with my time right now?
Yes. Exactly.
Now, if I'm going to be sitting reading a book, maybe sitting reading a paperback, but I don't even know the answer to that, but maybe reading a book is a more sustainable, or if I got it from the library, that's probably a more sustainable thing. If my hobby is, I don't know, go-kart racing or something, or there are many other things that I could do as hobbies which are way less sustainable. And I think that is where the sustainability choice is way more important. I mean, by all means, take the decision consciously within your craft or within your space. But I think those are much more impactful decisions. The one big thing that I think that may give craft people, certainly knitting and crochet, an exit from is fast fashion. Because if you participate in fast fashion, if you're buying fashionable jumpers from cheap brands, or it doesn't even have to be cheap brands, expensive brands, if you regard clothing as kind of disposable in that way, in that it's a new season, you'll buy something new because of how that looks. Knitting it in yourself, partly because you're forced to spend so much time on it, it becomes a more cherished object, and therefore the longevity is likely to be there, which makes it a more sustainable choice.
Well, this almost links back to our conversation about mistakes. And one of the reasons that I go back and will fix mistakes, we were in the pub last week, and that cuff where I said, I'm not sure about it. I went back and I redid that cuff and I'm really happy with it. I'd done some decreases to bring my cuff in, and I hadn't done the decreases quickly enough. And I was asking the group the Rogue Yarn Club, I was asking everyone like, I don't know if I should go back and redo this. I don't know. I'm so glad I did go back and do it, because actually that means that is going to be a jumper that is cherished and I love, rather than something where I'm like, I want to knit another one or knit one similar because that, I don't quite like the cuff, and then I don't really wear it. And all of the yarn and the environmental impact of having knit that is kind of kaput, really, just for the sake of going back and fixing something. And being intentional with the materials that you have is an important thing and an important consideration.
Yeah, I mean, but I would also say I am absolutely not a like holier than thou on that, because I also know that there are a couple of things that I've knitted where I probably won't ever wear them again, because I made them and they were important for my learning knitting journey, for what confidence or challenge that I was setting myself that I was trying to do. I've made them and now I don't actually like them, and I keep them as objects, but I'm not ever going to wear them. And that isn't, you can't say that that's a sustainable practice. But what is possibly more sustainable is that I gave myself an activity to do which was productive, was good for my mental health, was good for my long-term existence, was good for my education. So, to what extent does that, how does that play into sustainability? And that's partly why I get riled up about sustainability.
It's pros and cons. And I think everything within this sustainability conversation is weighing up things for individuals. It's weighing up choices. It's weighing up individual circumstances, be that financial circumstances, be it preference, be it allergies. There's so many different considerations, and there is not a universal right answer. If there was a universal right answer, we'd have one type of yarn, and we don't. We have so many different types of yarn, and we have so many different climates. I mean, you go to a yarn shop in Spain. Last week we talked about travel. I was in Spain like a year, 2 years ago, and mostly cotton yarns. Like a huge selection and choice of cotton, linen, light yarns, as you would expect in a summer warm place.
Yep.
And it was exciting because I was like, wow, I don't really normally get this choice because I live in a relatively cold climate. And we have so many different types of fibre and types of knitters around the world that you're just not going to have a right choice for everyone. I know this just probably sounds like a cop-out, but I think it's also part of the reason that we don't have definitive answers for you is because when it comes to handcraft as opposed to industrial processes, there isn't robust research on the life cycle analysis of the materials and environmental impact of our practices. There just isn't, because from what I can figure out, a lot of it is to do with the industrial financial interest of this research. So in terms of there will be industry interest in finding out how industrial textiles, how impactful they are for fast fashion, for buying things. I found lots of studies about knitting machines, knitting on demand, 3D seamless garments, lots of stuff there. But if you look for specifically hand knitting, you're not going to find that because they don't have the same kind of industrial regulations. We as individual knitters don't have government regulations saying we need to know how much carbon you're making in our bid for net zero. So we don't have that data. I don't want to completely scapegoat this, but I just think that we are in a position where we need to have compassion for each other and people's individual choices.
I know that I've been a little bit more ranty and that I've also talked about some more controversial topics, but I suppose I want to go back to a more sustainable and one quite exciting example that I found. People are probably aware listening to this podcast that I've tried a lot of different ways to make money in the world of knitting, and I've looked into lots of different things. One of the things that I have done is done some research into animal husbandry, because who doesn't love alpacas? And I've looked at
what you never told me about the alpacas.
So I
have an alpaca farm.
We are probably not is the answer. Oh, you're so heartbroken. But and the reason is, I find this fascinating. Obviously alpacas exist as wild animals in South America, and are very happy there. If you bring them over to the UK, then they take a little bit more work, and you've got to get them the right feed because they're not, like, grass isn't quite good enough for them. You need to supplement their feed. If you look after alpacas, the average cost of the sort of animal husbandry, so the feed and veterinary bills for a year, roughly can equal the value of the fleece that you can take from an alpaca in a year. That means that, and you might think about, oh gosh, well, that's potentially exciting. But you're not getting paid from that.
It's a labour of love.
So you're not getting any money from that. That is cost neutral. An alpaca can pay for itself, but you get nothing from that.
You get an alpaca.
Demo, if you're listening, I'm really sorry.
No, we've already discussed this. He already sees it as a potential in our future.
Interestingly, so there's there are a few alpaca farms around, and one of them that I love and I've knitted with their yarn is Burnt Fen alpacas. I'll give them a shout out. It's BURNT, Burnt Fen, which is not so far from Cambridge. in the grand scheme of the world.
I might have got something.
Yeah, they're at East Anglia Yarn Festival, one of the ways that they do make it a sustainable practice is that they have on site. You can learn weaving, or you can learn dyeing, or you can do yoga with alpacas, or you can take the alpacas for walks. And that's how you make alpaca farming sustainable in the UK, is that you have
financially sustainable,
yeah. And then it becomes a sustainable practice, but it's a hard thing to do. And again, that's because, the value of wool is low, unfortunately. Oh my God, I didn't even get to talk about, I'm conscious of the time, and I didn't even get to talk about why.
Episode 2.
It does feel like we have to go back.
That would be episode 18. Can you believe 18 episodes?
It's a lot, isn't it?
I know, it's crazy. Wow.
What am I going to do? Shall I shut up now and shall we go on to another episode?
Yeah.
I've got so much more to say.
I know. There's so much more to say. I said so much more. I say, you say, I say, I have to say on paper. I'm sorry.
We haven't even got to your 16 binders that you're keeping under the table of all your other notes and references.
They were supposed to be a surprise. I haven't even got to my Forever Whisk story.
No, there's all sorts of stories that I haven't got to.
I think it's going to be 3 parts. No, there won't be. We will just...
What did I tell you? I said.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So I guess we are wrapping up there because we are running out of time. But thank you so much for listening. We would say that if you found this interesting, then maybe share this with a friend.
Or enjoyable. Interesting and enjoyable. We just get so many lovely comments and diehard fans who comment saying how much they love the podcast. And actually, we'd love to grow the Yarn Library community and to share the conversations that we have far and wide.
So if you don't have to find it interesting and enjoyable. It can be one or the other.
Or any other feelings.
Or you can say...
You could even do a hate share.
Yeah, listen to this awful episode and these 2 idiots prattling on about...
Non-sustainability experts talking about sustainability. How could they?
Using their unjustified platform for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, if everyone who was listening to this podcast shared it with 2 friends, if you have a think now and go, I wonder if this person and this person might enjoy this podcast. And if you were to share it with them, though critically also share it with them from past the Game of Wool point, because we do have a lot of new listeners who go to the beginning of series 1 and then go, I don't want to...
Why am I listening? It's not topical.
Well, it's not topical. It's not current. So
I would also please ask you to share this in the most sustainable way possible. And for me, that probably is writing it on parchment. Carrier pigeon.
Yeah. That is not verified. That is not referenced. I've not done a life cycle analysis of carrier pigeon. I imagine it's not actually very sustainably okay. But there we go.
What size hole should we dig for ourselves now? Should we just end it?
You've been listening to Yarn Library Podcast with Adam Cleveley at Cleveley Knits and me, Georgia Denham at Tulip Earl. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share and subscribe. And if you didn't, shh, it's a yarn.